the American dream used to be get a good job, get paid good enough to go buy you a house with a yard and have a dog.
Sure.
That American dream is now kind of disappearing.
Renting is actually cheaper than owning as it stands right now. Less and less people actually want to own a house. If somebody really wants to buy a home, then they're gonna have to increase their skills to make more money, or they need to start living below their means. They need to start saving money. They can stop eating out. They can stop drinking, coffee bean, right? They'll eventually be able to afford to buy a home.
First thing that I learned from my mentors was in corporate, you work on your weaknesses. You're well-rounded, but in entrepreneurship,
Some of my business partner divorces have been more complicated than if I were to get divorced in my marriage.
What are you looking for in a partner? And then what are some discreditors of a partner?
Number one thing I'm looking for is, do we align on our personal core values? Stop thinking you need to be the smartest guy or gal in the world to go buy a company or do this, that, and the other thing. You do not. You need...
Austin Zaback, over here, the man, the myth, the legend in the flesh in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Something like that. I appreciate you having me, man.
Appreciate you having me. I just was on your show, and I've been basically living at your studio this week. So appreciate the hospitality.
How's it been? Good?
It's been great. It's been great. Yeah, me and your team are basically homies at this point. We all just hang out now. But man, I'm super excited to interview you today because you are someone that's just a businessman through and through. You have 3 core companies. You have a media company, you have a residential real estate company, and you have one of the largest wholesaling companies in the nation.
Yep.
And so we have a lot of cash flow, a lot of business, a lot of stuff coming in today. And so I'm curious, first, I want to allow you to introduce yourself and add a little bit of meat to that.
Yeah.
And then I kind of want to break each one of these businesses down sequentially. So how would you introduce yourself to a stranger today?
At the end of the day, I'm just a serial entrepreneur, right? I've been very blessed, very fortunate to end up in the position that I have. I've failed more than I've succeeded by a long shot. I've started 12 companies. I currently own probably 7 or 8, if you include title, mortgage, insurance, everything like that. And we're actively looking at, doing a lot of what you're doing, actually. So I'm excited to, we might talk a little bit about that. But real estate is my bread and butter. It always has been. And anytime I've, gone away from that, I've always found myself back doing residential real estate at an extremely high level. So that would be probably how to introduce myself. But, I'm a brand builder, right? I like social media. I want to be omnipresent. I want people to know who I am. And in some way, shape, or form, I know that'll drive revenue.
Beautiful. So I actually want to start on the kind of macro economy or macro situation before we dive into the sequential business building, because as somebody that is very, very, very deep, both in helping people buy their first time homes and also wholesaling homes off market, I think that you're probably more tuned in to the residential real estate market in America than 99% of people.
Probably.
So let's talk about the situation today, man, because I see a lot of people that are in our sphere that are saying, I'm going to go buy these houses and do all of this stuff. Then you go back to 95% of normal people that are struggling to buy that first home, right? And every time that they try to buy a home, it gets bought in cash by a BlackRock, by a private equity firm. So where do you see the ball going for these first-time home buyers today in this market? And what's some advice that we can give to them? Because I see their videos too, and I want to help them as well, because the American dream used to be get a good job, get paid good enough to go buy you a house with a yard and have a dog.
Sure.
That American dream is now kind of disappearing.
It is.
What do you think?
It's a great question. And there's so much to that, so I'll try to keep it short. There's a lot of it is opinion, right? It's there is no fact, when it comes to some of what we might talk about as it pertains to that. But, I think that there are a lot of first-time homebuyer programs out there. People need to do their due diligence. They need to go look. If they've never owned a home, they need to talk to multiple different lenders. They need to talk to multiple different brokers, even potentially. They can broker that loan out to, 50 different banks and see who's willing to give them the best deal, right? Because it does exist out there. Now, if you're a first-time homebuyer, unfortunately, living, and you want to be in a place like Arizona, Las Vegas, Florida, Texas, maybe places like that, then you're probably gonna have to start going towards the outskirts of town, right? Let's take Arizona, for example, okay? We're in Scottsdale right now, right? you're probably not going to buy in Scottsdale, okay? You're probably never going to buy again in Scottsdale unless you're making a lot of money because they're not making any more land, right? And, this is where a lot of the wealth is actually at, right? And so, at the end of the day, I think in Arizona, you're going to have a commute, right? If you want to be in that 300, 400, 500K range, first-time home buyer with minimal amount of money down, then you're going to need to be in Glendale, Peoria, Buckeye, Maricopa, Santan Valley, right? Places like that. And so I think you just have to get creative, right? But I'll also say too, like, I think technically, correct me if I'm wrong, renting is actually cheaper than owning as it stands right now.
It is. It 1,000% is. And I actually rent my primary as well.
And I was renting up until literally 3 weeks ago. I've been renting for the last 7 years. I've been living at the Optima, if you're familiar. And so, I'm a pretty big advocate of just renting. I think a lot of people, like, going back to our generation and, like, future generations, I think less and less people actually want to own a house too. So
it's a lot of work.
Right. It's a ton of work. The mindset is actually shifting as well, though. So there is that part of it, right? Of like the American dream, yada, 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 is becoming more unattainable. But there's then also the part of it where the actual American dream itself is just changing. Right? That's
huge.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, say more.
Not everybody wants to own a home anymore. I have a lot of friends. I know a lot of people that they have zero desire to own a home. They don't want to be tied down. They want to be in an apartment where if something breaks, they put in a work order online from their smartphone from anywhere in the world. The repairman goes and fixes it. They lock the door behind them, and that's that, right? And you don't have to deal with anything. And by the way, if an opportunity comes along or you buy a business or whatever happens, you just tear your lease in half and you move.
Correct. Like, and I've done that.
You know what I'm saying? Pay your $5,000 penalty or whatever and get the hell out of Dodge. With a house, you're locked in. You've got a bunch of equity. You have to let it sit on the market. You've got to show it a bunch. You've got to make a bunch of repairs. You can't just up and leave whenever you want. So I think that fundamentally things are changing in general. And I think that back to, I guess the last thing I'll say, and then I'll pause, is like, if somebody really wants to buy a home, then they're going to have to, and they make minimum wage or they make a low amount of money, they either need to increase their skills to make more money, right? Or they need to start living below their means. They need to start saving money, okay? I know a lot of people who live way above their means. Most people can find a way to save money if they want to. Right? They can stop eating out. They can stop drinking, coffee bean, right? They can stop, they can make changes to their lifestyle to save money over the course of time. They'll eventually be able to afford to buy a home.
I like that you said that about the American dream, because I think that's the biggest place that we want to take this, because people that listen to this podcast are high income earners, high performers. They've got money, they're investing. We talk about high level income strategy. We got freaking billionaires on the show as well. But it's just an interesting idea. The idea that the American dream is not dead, it's just different.
It is.
It's completely different. And so today, from somebody that's built up multiple companies, how long did it take you to, like, a decade or more?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really I would say I've been a full-time entrepreneur for about 11 years.
Yeah. That checks out.
Yep.
Because it just takes time. Like wealth built in the crock pot, not the microwave, right?
Yep.
And so if somebody was on their wealth building journey today, let's talk to the person that's in that corporate job right now. Let's say they're making $200,000, $300,000 a year. They've got good skills. They have maybe a short-term rental or two. They have some real estate. And now they're really trying to figure out, what's the way that they can build their American dream so that they can finally go into ownership of business and ownership of larger real estate properties and be able to leave that job and do what they want, when they want, with who they want. What's some advice that you can give them to get started today?
Well, I think, they just have to look in the mirror first and foremost, right? And ask themselves, what do they want out of life? Everybody wants something different out of life. We interview people all the time, right? And we talk to different people, and no two people are the exact same. I've got a good buddy, Zach Keeps. You might know him.
I just was FaceTiming with him yesterday.
Yeah, he's a FaceTimer, right? If you text him, he'll FaceTime you 2 seconds later. So love you, Zach. But the guy owns 330 rental properties, 90% equity, right? I mean, 10% debt on the whole portfolio, if that. I think 250 of them he owns free and clear, right? He's managing his whole portfolio. That's his definition of the dream. Now, if I owned that big of a portfolio,
hell no,
I would have a property manager.
I would have sold it all and bought commercial.
Right.
But
I would have,
shout out Zach.
Exactly. I would have had a property manager, but he loves getting in his Tesla and FaceTiming all of his tenants, and that it, you can tell he's genuinely having a good time. And oh, by the way, he's probably making $700,000 or $800,000 a month in cash flow every month, like clockwork, right? So everybody's just got a different vision, man. I think you got to look in the mirror and say, what do I want to do with my life? Because like, I look at my company sometimes and what I have going on, right? And the days where I'm having a bad day and I'm like, oh man, I really don't want to do it. Sometimes I'll just ask myself, I'm like, but what the hell would I do otherwise? Right? Like I've traveled, like similar to you, I don't think I've traveled quite as much as you, but I've probably been to 20, 25 countries. I've done a fair amount of traveling. I've flown Emirates first class, business class. I've done all the cool crap, right? And, I can only stay in the Maldives for about 5 or 6 days and I'm bored out of my mind.
Correct.
So, if I'm not living in my version of chaos, what the hell would I be doing? Now, that's just me, right? Somebody else, they might say, hey, Austin, I could go to the Maldives for 5 years and be just happy. I couldn't be.
I think that they are in love with the idea of it, but they just haven't done it.
They haven't done it.
Because I quit my job and I lived in the Greek islands for a month.
Yeah.
And same as you. It's just how you're cut, man, because winners win. And you're only a winner if you're winning. Yep. And as soon as you stop winning, you're no longer a winner.
Totally.
And so you have a breakdown of identity. There was this video of Jerry Seinfeld, a famous comedian, one of the most famous comedians that exists, talking to this other like up-and-coming comedian. And he goes, Jerry, I've been crushing it, man. I've been working my ass off for 5 years, and I've been doing these small shows, and I just don't feel like I can get a break. I just don't feel like I can get ahead. And then Jerry's just kind of laughing at him. He goes like, 5 years?
Yeah.
He goes, anything else you would have rather been doing? Like, you're complaining to me about doing 5 years of shows. He's like, what else would you have been doing?
Right.
So it's like a lot of the time that we complain about this whole idea of delayed gratification and saving and working for tomorrow, but that time is passing anyways. Yeah. It's just, are you working on your dream or somebody else's?
Totally.
Right? So let's walk through your companies today. And because each one of these is a big old company, and a lot of people may see where you're at today and they think, okay, cool, like all these millionaires and like Zach and all these Austin, all these people, they got all these streams of income.
Sure.
You don't do it all at one time. So walk through your process of how you built these one by one, and more importantly, at what point is your business sustainable enough, business one, sustainable enough for you to say, check, 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 I can now move on to business two?
Yeah. Phenomenal question, because I screwed it up massively. So hopefully somebody can learn from my mistakes. So, I got into wholesaling real estate when I was 17 and a half, going on 18 years old. Okay. So wholesaling, for anybody who doesn't know, is just selling the contract to the property. Okay. You get a property under contract, you sell that contract. Essentially, you assign the contract to a cash buyer for a profit, okay? So you're not buying the property, you're not flipping the property, you're not doing any of that, right? We're now one of the biggest wholesalers in the world, along with Keegley and a couple of the other big companies out there, okay? That would be our competition if you were to look at competition, okay? It's like Jamil Damji, Josiah Grimes, all them, right? Love all those guys, by the way.
What about Pineda?
Pineda's a great dude. Pineda's a great friend. Yeah, I don't think Pineda's as big of a wholesaler as we are, but he hasn't been wholesaling nearly as long as I have. Yeah. So he's built, like, his education company is a lot bigger than ours. You know, when it comes to wholesaling, we're pretty big. So anyways, so I built wholesaling. Okay, now I've rebuilt that company probably 5 times. Right, over the course of the last 11 years, because it was my first company I ever did. I got in some partnerships along the way that just didn't last. It wasn't the right fit, right? And you'd have to kind of dissolve the company and kind of rebuild it again, And so I've kind of done that company the wrong way multiple times. Now, along the way, so to your question, very important, started other companies that were not vertically integrated. So let me give you an example. Here I am building my wholesale company. We're doing a bunch of deals, making a ton of money. I get shiny object syndrome. I go and I start an ATM company, right? Next thing you know, I've got 200 ATMs, around the whole nation. And, all of a sudden, I'm looking at buying an armored truck company because I'm like, dude, we have too much cash. Like there's like, we had to buy a Prius. So we were low key about it, and we were like hiring like money loaders to load the ATMs. And the next thing you know, my wholesale company is suffering.
Shocking.
Right? Shocking, right? And so I did that, made that mistake, got sold that company, got out of it. I own a marketing agency, right? Same thing, and I always looked and I always would take a step back after the fact and I'd be like, man, anytime I start a different company that isn't related to real estate or vertically integrated with that, my main thing dies. It freaking it just rots. I may as well take it behind the barn and shoot it, like Kevin O'Leary would say, right? And so I think that the key there is that I never had that company big enough to where it could operate without me. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know that at the time. Like I didn't know what I didn't know, right? And it was one of those things where like I thought it was big enough. I thought I had the infrastructure in place. I thought I had the systems and processes in place for it to operate while I went over here and did this other thing. And it just wasn't at that point, And so that was a thing that I would just say, everybody should learn from that, right? We live in a day and an age where, you own a company, whatever, even people who own a company, and they're scrolling on social media and they get shiny object syndrome because they look at other people and they're like, oh man, that looks really sexy. I want to go do this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, you better make for damn sure that your main thing paying your bills, your main company that you have rocking and rolling is big enough to allow you to step out and go do something else.
Have you heard of the 2-week vacation test?
I haven't.
So shout out to my buddy Austin Netzley. I think this is mandatory for every business owner at any level.
Okay.
And so the 2-week vacation test is the perfect litmus test to determine is your business actually operating without you. So what you do is you book a 2-week vacation and you have to go out, no phone, no email, no nothing.
Love that.
And you go with your family and you tell your team for 2 weeks, I'm completely gone. And so now the 2-week vacation test accomplishes 2 different things. Well, 3 things actually. So the first thing is, before you're doing it, you're working with your team to build up all the systems that subconsciously you knew were already bad.
Sure.
And now you're working to say, okay, cool. That's what I'm about to do this summer. I'm going to in June to Europe. And so I'm building all these systems. I'm like, okay, we need to reinforce the sales team, reinforce marketing, reinforce all of this before I'm gone, because then I'm gone, right? So that's thing number 1. Thing number 2 is it helps you unplug as a business owner, and it forces you to, because all you're thinking about when you're starting week 1 is, oh my God, what's going on with the business? What's going on with the business? What's going on with the business? So it's helping you to remember to, actually take time for you. And the third thing that happens, which is the worst part, but the best part at the same time, is things break.
Yep, of course.
And you have to let them. So what happens is now you get to come home and it's not theory anymore. You get to see what broke.
Right.
And you say, that's what we work on. And so I did this like 2 years ago. And that's, I think, an awesome test to that. So if you had gone and done like a 2-week thing and come back and been like, oh my God, when no leads came in.
I would have known better.
Yeah, no leads came in. I'm the marketing bottleneck.
Yep.
Or there was no dispo. I'm the dispo. I'm the relationship bottleneck.
Yep.
So I think that's so interesting to that point. So if you were to go back to you in that same circumstance, what advice would you give to you, like to say, be sure to have this, this, and this done, maybe 3 things done in the business before doing anything else?
1,000,000%. Great question. And I love that test. I think it's something that every entrepreneur should do at some point, right?
It's hard.
It is hard. And I've done it a lot now. I will say, like, we're at a point now where I could be gone for a year. And I'm talking no phone, no nothing. And I would come back and my companies would be bigger than they are today. First and foremost, right? My biggest lesson in all of that was like, why you need to ask yourself if you're going to start number uno or number dos, right? Meaning you already have a company and you're like, I'm going to start another company, right? Like people on multiple streams of income. We all get sold that, right? Which is great at a certain point, right? But I would just ask yourself, have you gone as deep as you can go on your main thing? Like, can you go deeper? Can you go wider? Can you freaking, double the revenue? Like, have you maxed it out? Like, why are you starting another thing? Because a lot of times it actually will take less energy. A lot of times the reason people want to start the second thing is they're like, well, I'll personally make more money, right? Like, I'll take home more money. And that's like their goal, right? And that's what I thought. And it was like, okay, but I'll actually take home more money with less effort by just going deeper on the main thing,
current thing.
right? How do we improve our marketing? How do we improve our sales? How do we improve our systems? Who do we need to hire? You know, like, and really building it out and looking at that and making sure that I've gone as deep as I can possibly go, right? So I would just recommend to any young person, if you are even thinking about starting a second thing, you know, and you're young and you haven't been doing it for like 5 or more years, like, it's probably too soon.
That's
like,
it's
most likely too soon, right? Like, I mean, your test is a great, way to test that theory out, but I mean, it's probably too soon, dude. Like, you hear guys like Andy Frisella and stuff talk about, 10 years sleeping in the frickin', on the floor of his business, right? Like, it just takes time. I've met very few people that can shortcut the time aspect of things. Like, I mean, it's almost unheard of. And anybody who I do see who's like in year 3 and they claim to be big balling, I'm really skeptical. I look at them and I'm like, bro, I don't know if I believe it. You know what I mean?
1000%.
Because it just takes time. You like, I've started a lot of companies, and I have partners who are very intelligent. I believe I'm, somewhat intelligent, and it still takes time. There's just no way to shortcut that.
Yeah, and you have to remind yourself of that too, because I mean, even us, like, we're 3 years deep to that point, and it's just like, you can be confident in what you're doing, but then also be aware. Like,
totally,
it's a balance between confidence and consciousness, to where you're saying, okay, cool, like, I can zoom out and I can see things for what they are, and then that's why the rooms that you're in are so important. So I've got a really good question for you that I don't quite have the answer for. I've got an idea of an answer that I'll share after, but I'm curious about yours first.
Cool.
And this is, I think the main reason that people have shiny object syndrome is because they aren't certain on what is the best opportunity.
Yep.
So we're talking about opportunity costs. It's like, if you had a company and you were like, dude, I am certain that this is the best opportunity, and you did like a cost benefit analysis, and each company, that new company that came up, you're like, no, I'm going to compare apples to apples. This is the best opportunity. I'm sticking to it. Then people would be able to stick to it. Do you have any rules of thumbs or maybe advice that you can give on this?
Well, it's a great question. I think I would ask myself first and foremost, let's say you're already 2 years deep into a particular company, right?
Yeah.
And now you see another opportunity and you're like, oh, maybe I should go over here and do that, right? You need to be damn certain that this other one is a better opportunity, because you've already spent 2 years over here.
So every yes becomes more expensive.
Every yes becomes more expensive, right? Because you're like, it's the sunk cost fallacy, right? It's I've already sunk all of this time, energy, and effort over here. If there's even a possibility that will start to decline if I move over here, then I've got to be really freaking careful, right? I've got to make for dang sure that this opportunity over here is like 10x the potential. And, still find a way to get this thing to try to, manage, at least maintain or slightly increase year over year while I kind of, go over here, right? I think the other way to potentially do this, though, is to bring in partners. You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of people, the right partners, of course, go read Rocket Fuel, go read Traction, right? Read some of these books, figure out the difference between an integrator and a visionary and all these different things, right? But, sometimes, like, there's that old saying, if you chase 2 rabbits, you'll catch neither, right?
Correct.
Yeah, but what if there's just 2 people chasing 2 rabbits? Like, what if you just hire somebody to catch that rabbit while you catch that one, right? Or what if you bring in a partner to catch that one while you catch that one? So like, that's what I've done over the years now, right? I have partners in every company that I own. They're all phenomenal human beings. We could have a whole episode on how to find the right partner, right? But partnerships can potentially be the solution to that problem, right? Bringing in somebody who has the opposite skill set that you have and dividing and conquering, so that way. And by the way, partners are normally free. You could hire people, right? So like, a lot of people are always like, well, should I hire somebody like a high level, like a CEO or somebody like that, or a chief sales officer or whatever the case may be, a high level person, or should I bring in a partner? And I'm like, well, can you afford to hire the high level person? Because if not, because remember, you got to front load your employees. I got to pay tomorrow. Partner, I can pay a year from now. They can get paid up. Remember, they're a partner, right? So they're signing up for the vision. They're signing up to get paid in the future. So you don't necessarily need to pay a partner right away. If you're not getting paid, they're not getting paid, right? So, I'm not sure if that answers your question entirely.
No, it does, to a degree, yeah.
To a degree, right? But it's like, just be careful. Now, I think in your situation it's different, right? I think I'm talking about the people that are good at one thing and they're thinking about starting another thing. See, you're in the business of actually buying businesses, technically.
Correct. But even with that, so I mean, to play devil's advocate and to kind of bring it back to where it's like we're working on is you asked me in our podcast interview about my real estate.
Sure.
And so I get co-GP opportunities all the time.
Same. Yep.
On everything. And I have to make strategic decisions about each one of them because for me, my attention is my most valuable asset.
It's true.
And so I look at things and I'm like, well, that's a lot of new. And I already know the devil that I'm playing with here. I don't know the devils that I'm playing with over there. So it's just like the bodies are going to be buried regardless. So I'm like, at least I know where the bodies are buried here with what I'm working on. And so my greatest fear is saying yes to something and then paying the price of that with my attention to where all of a sudden that carves out 10 hours a week for me is a lot of my attention that I can't put towards my current business. But to your point, like I was sitting in the seat with one of my friends that's going to be a freaking billionaire by the time he's 40 or 50. And he was talking about partnerships. And so the reason I haven't been doing the real estate is because I haven't had the right partnerships.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, well, what am I going to have to be involved in doing? And what am I bringing to the table and all of this? But it's like, to your point, if the focus is on partnerships properly, then that is how you scale exponentially.
Sure.
So if I would almost say that instead of focusing so much on hiring, which is a huge core skill, I think that somebody that's listening that's getting started should more so focus on partnership and mastering that skill because you can get the partner that's the master of hiring.
Right.
And then you could unlock that skill set through the partner. So let's talk for the last bit of the show about partnership and what you're looking for. So what are you looking for in a partner? And then what are some discreditors of a partner?
Yeah, I love this question. I've had a lot of partners. And now I really mean it when I say I have the best partners in the world in every company, right? Number one thing I'm looking for is, do we align on our personal core values? Okay? If I'm a Christian and they're a non-believer, it is a no-go for me.
That's fair.
Because when we disagree and when shit hits the fan, for lack of better terms, where do we fall back on? Where's the common ground, right? See, with all my like I'm a Christian, right? And all my partners are Christian. And if there were ever to be a day where we had a major disagreement, we just flip open the Bible. Hey, what does the Bible say? Like, can we find something in the Bible? Can we find a proverb? Can we find something where we can look at it and find the solution to our problem? Can it point us in the right direction? Can we pray about it? Can we ask God what we should do? Right? Hey, God, what should we do? We're in this crossroads. We can take the company this way or we can take the company that way. What should we do? Let's pray on it, right? So, like, that's the number one thing. And it could be, it doesn't have to be Christianity or anything like that, right? I understand everybody's got different things. But my whole point of this, of what I'm saying is, let's say you used to be a drug addict and you're now 20 years sober. Okay? And you're thinking about bringing in a partner and your partner drinks and does drugs every weekend. Well, that might not be a good partner because you're probably going to spend a lot of time with that guy or gal, right? And if you're not aligned, if it's actually difficult for you to stay off of drugs, you've been sober, then you want to be really careful. You're not surrounding yourself with somebody who maybe on a Friday night after a late night's worth of work is like, hey, dude, come on, let's just go it's just one drink. Let's go. We deserve it. We earned it. We just closed a $100,000 deal. Let's go have a beer, right? Yeah. It's probably not going to be good.
Even seasonality too. Yeah. So it's just like, or not necessarily seasonality, but what season that you're in on a partnership perspective and a personal perspective. So somebody like me, that's like very much so, we call it in the hunt.
Yep.
You need to make sure that you have somebody else that's also in the hunt.
Totally.
So I've had a lot of partners that, were in their mid 50s or potential partners, mid 50s, family.
Yeah.
They're more so about preservation.
Totally.
I'm about accumulation. So you need to make sure that, if somebody is about preservation, what role are they playing? Maybe they're sitting on the board seat. Maybe they're a smaller equity percentage, and they have a role to play. But you need to have accumulation, or preservation.
Totally.
So you need to have somebody that's aligned with you in the season of life that they're in as well. I'll tell you something that I look for, and knock on wood that I think that I'm doing this the right way. I'm not God's gift to underwriting.
Sure.
That's not my strength. And the first thing that I learned from my mentors was in corporate, you work on your weaknesses. So you're well-rounded. But in entrepreneurship, you double down, 10x your strengths. You hire and partner with your weaknesses.
Delegate your weaknesses, yep.
So for me, how I underwrite my partners and my operators of my companies, which is like the most important thing, is I'm looking and I'm like, what do you have to lose?
Yeah.
And so a lot of my people, you know, newborn kids, and they're hungry, and a lot of them are in our community. So they come to me for an example of this. They come to me and they say like, hey, you know, like I just got let go of this job. You know, I've been a high performer. I've got a new kid. So one of the companies that we're buying is with a guy like this. He's like, we just got restructured out of my company. I just came back from paternity leave, got fired. My job doesn't exist anymore. And he goes, now what? Now I'm going to go buy a business.
Right.
And I'm like, dude, I don't care what business that you're going to buy. I trust you with it. I'm going to give you my money. Because this guy's going to make sure his kid eats.
Sure.
Like, I'm 100% in on that guy.
Totally.
And I've got another guy I'm buying a gym with. The same thing, where he's like, him and his wife are going to quit. They're going to run the gym.
Yep.
It's both of their passion. So they're passionate about it. They got a newborn kid. So
I love that.
Dude, I'm all in on that.
Yeah.
I mean, anything in particular, like other rules of thumb like that you have?
That's a great one. So yeah, you got the first one that we talked about. You have yours that we talked about. I would say really maybe the third one just might be going back to like rocket fuel and traction, right? Like
Personalities?
Personalities and skill set, right? If you're a visionary, you might not want to partner with another visionary because
that'd be miserable.
What value are they bringing? Not only would it be miserable, right? It would be miserable because you're going to clash all the time. But secondary to that, what value do they bring that you don't have, right? Like you already have that value. You're a visionary.
If there's two of you, one of you isn't needed.
100%. You know, so always partner with somebody that brings something to the table that you don't bring to the table, right? Like all my partners are really good at stuff that I'm not good at. Every one of them. Right? They're amazing at stuff that I'm not good at. And by the way, I'm great at things that they can't do, such as what we're doing right now. Right? Not that they couldn't do it. All my partners could do it, but they don't want to. They don't have the desire to. And they haven't spent the last 10 years doing it. So for them to even get remotely close to what I've built would take them 10 years. Right. So they allow me to run in my lane of, you know, marketing, you know, omnipresence, stuff like that. And I allow them to run in their lane. And there's that trust factor. And, you know, knowing that, you know, I trust them and they trust me, you know, like it's not this like, and again, it goes back to like having similar core personal values. Right. But I could go on vacation for 3 months. They're not going to be like, what's Austin doing? Like what's he bringing to the table? Like that's not how our partnership works, right? Like we're not like checking in on each other all the time. It's just like I trust because we have similar personal core values. I trust that whatever it is that they're doing is what it is that they're supposed to be doing. And the alternative is also true, right? Like I'm not like, dude, why weren't you here at 9 a.m.? It's like I don't care. Right, because I know that they're upholding their end of the bargain, and their role is gonna get complete. It doesn't matter if they're not if they're in the office, they're not in the office. You know, so trust is a big one too. You know,
trust but verify.
Trust but verify. Yeah.
So you just said a lot of gold.
Yep.
What does this look like on the operating agreement?
Sure, 1,000,000%, and we have that operating agreement, right?
And a lot of people don't, though.
A lot
of people take what you just said, and that's like level one of the game, and they go, all right, Austin, like me and you, like I'm great at ops, you're great at sales, like let's go 50-50.
And
they've got an operating agreement where they're on the cap table and they're like, we're gonna form Business Buying LLC.
Yep.
And it's gonna say BIZ buying because we want to be trendy. And then we're gonna have like 50-50, and then here's how we're gonna split the profit. Let's go.
Yep.
And they don't have any roles and responsibilities listed in the OA, and they don't have any clauses for what happens if somebody disappears, what happens if somebody dies, what happens if somebody just decides that they don't want to work and they're not fulfilling their end of the bargain. How do they get bought out? At what level? What equity? What format?
Yeah. You got to have all that in the OA.
Talk to us about OAs.
Well, I mean, you got to talk about it. You have to have the verbal conversation, and then you need to hire an attorney, and you need to put it together. I would not rely on ChatGPT to do your OA if you want a good one, right? I see a lot of people that get on to ChatGPT. They're like, write me an operating agreement. Sure, it can do it, but it's probably not going to be that great. I mean, you know, I think attorneys are still better than ChatGPT. Now, that might be different in 10 years from now or even 5 years from now. But as of today, I think you need a good attorney or a good template. I'm sure you provide that to your students. And, you know, you need to make sure that you cover all the bases. You just covered a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
And have that verbal conversation with your partner before you frickin' partner. right? Like, hey, dude, like, what do the next 5-10 years look like for you? What do you want to do every day? What does that look like? How much time do you want to dedicate, right? If the day ever comes where you pass away, do you want, what does that look like, right? Like, we've talked through all of that. You know what I mean? My partners know what happens if I die right now, right? My wife knows what happens if I die right now. You know what I mean? So you want to make sure that you have those conversations up front so that, you know, in the long run, it doesn't cause problems. I think a lot of people, they don't like to have uncomfortable conversations because they don't want to stir the pot, but then they end up having a much bigger issue down the line.
Mm-hmm. I think that ChatGPT should be used like email or like Outlook or the Google Calendar, or it's a tool.
Yeah.
And so what we use it as is, again, like, and also we can have a whole conversation about AI, but we're closing out here in the next 8 minutes. So I think that AI is not going to be the great equalizer.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's going to be the people that understand how to use it the best.
Yeah.
Are still going to, because it's all about the prompt.
Right.
So the prompt that I put in, I think it can do 80% of the work.
Yep.
Now, instead of hiring a lawyer for like 100 hours, we can hire a lawyer for 4.
Right.
You know, so,
have
because
them
they're
fine-tune
billable
it.
hours. Yeah. So what we do is that entire conversation that we just talked about, I go in and the prompt I'm putting in isn't like draft me an OA.
Right.
My prompt is, hey, hey chat. I call it chat. I'm like, hey chat, you are a 50-year, hard-nosed, grizzled business buying veteran with a background in legal compliance and fraud.
Yep.
I'm like, you view things through the lens of what could go wrong, and you rarely see things for how they could go right. You're the person I have on my team that looks at every single possible way that I can get sued or screwed.
Yep.
What are a list of 30 questions that I should be talking to with my potential partner for us to verbally and via email, confirm?
It's a good prompt.
And then you have them in a position of that. Like with that prompt, I've had it underwrite and give me fantastic questions. And then you go through it and you have that groundwork done. Then you bring the lawyer in at the end to polish it all up and bring a few extra things in, because we had a lawyer that we were talking to, and we brought the lawyer in for the earnouts and like buyouts. So then the lawyer was like, okay, cool. So, year 1, Brian doesn't fulfill his end of the bargain.
Yeah.
At what multiple, and how are we valuing the business? Because is he bought out? Because there's a million ways to value a business.
Sure.
So you need to put at what valuation of the business are you guys getting bought out?
Yep.
Any other stories that you can share of maybe like experiences that you had where you said, oh man, like this is maybe where this went wrong, or an area, an opportunity for improvement?
I think it's really everything we just talked about, right? I mean, I think the core values is one of the biggest things that I've seen in my life, just not align after a period of time, and therefore it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
But you got to remember, a lot of my companies thus far have been slightly different than like the types of companies that you're buying, right? Like every company all my companies that you see right now, if you walk through my office, we have 7 offices throughout the nation. This is one of them we're sitting in, but they're all bootstrapped, ground up companies, right? Like you know what I mean? So like debt free, bootstrapped, everything's owned in cash. Everything you see in here is owned in cash. I have 0 debt. I've never taken out a loan in my entire life on any of the companies I've ever built, right? So I've been in the trenches with my partners. It's not like we have a long distance relationship, right? Like we're in the friggin' trenches. Like every new company I've ever started, I mean, we'll do partner meetings till midnight. We're ordering Uber Eats. Like we're spending a lot of time together, And then of course, we're spending time apart too, because they're doing what they're doing, I'm doing what I'm doing. But I think, the core value thing is the one I've made the biggest mistake on. It's the one that I think that people overlook the most, right? Now, it doesn't matter.
You think someone can change, that people won't change?
Well, you can't expect them to change. No. Yes, I do think people can change. It's an entirely different podcast, but I don't think that you can't want what somebody else doesn't want, right? Like you can't want for them what they don't want for themselves. So yes, that person can change when they want to change, not when you want them to change, right? So if you don't like the person for who they are today, then you probably shouldn't get in bed with them. I always tell people, I've never been divorced in like my actual marriage, like I'm married, right? But from what I have been through in my life, I would venture to guess that some of my business partner divorces have been more complicated than if I were to get divorced in my marriage, which I never ever intend on, by the way. But I'm just hypothetically, right? I think that it's complicated to divorce a business partner if you're not careful, right? Now, if you have a really dial-in operating agreement, everything's, sure, maybe it might be a little bit easier, but it's still difficult, right? You're splitting assets, you're splitting liabilities, it's hard. It's like, who takes the office? Who takes this microphone? Like, you know what I mean? So, I think that would probably be what I would say about that.
Yeah, at the end of the day, people may be listening to this and think, wow, okay, this is a lot. And I would say that you can't escape hard. You can't escape hard. But what we're talking about, and we're conscious about what we talk about, we're not talking about the process of wholesaling a home or of building a real estate team, because look, that's been done.
Right.
It's documented. And so what we're talking about is the actual stuff that when like me and Austin are at dinner, this is the stuff we would talk about is hiring, talent, attraction, retention, and scale.
Yep.
It's all business owners talk about. So now it's like that I'm kind of on the other side of this. I would call myself in the teenage years of business ownership. And we're in the maturity stage, the maturing stage. I can say that I like talking about this stuff because if we can bring this to the forefront of people and they're thinking about things this way from day one, the rest just snaps into place.
Totally.
It's truly who, not how.
Yep, I agree. And that book is incredible, by the way.
Yeah, I'm interviewing Ben next month.
Are you really? Very cool. Yeah, who, not how, man. And that really is how I built a lot of my companies. Through the network, through people, it's not a matter of you. You talked about it in my podcast where I interviewed you a little while ago, right? Like, you don't got to be Elon Musk. I'm not Elon Musk. I'm not Jeff Bezos. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I didn't go to college. I barely got through high school, right? But I am really good at networking. I'm really good at talking to people. I'm really good at building trust with people. I'm really good at working hard, right? I'm really good at leading by example. And so, I'm able to solve problems by looking at my phone book and saying, who in the hell in my phone book has been through what I'm going through right now and will help me out, right? And I've gotten really good at that over the years. And that has made me tens of millions of dollars,
It's all about relationships.
It's all about relationships.
And we're just going to people need to be reminded of that more than they need to be taught.
They do. Yeah, they 100% do. Yeah, stop thinking you need to be the smartest guy or gal in the world to go buy a company or do this, that, and the other thing. You do not. You need to have your risk tolerance be slightly higher than the average American and take action and figure it out along the way, right?
For most people, the highest risk thing that they can do is taking no risk.
100%.
Yeah.
But they don't even see it that way. That's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Austin, if people want to find out more about you, they want to follow along with the journey, they want to follow your podcast that I was just on, where can they find you?
Austin Zaback on every platform, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, etc. And my podcast is The Austin Zaback Show.
Checks out, huh? So guys, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody, be sure to like and subscribe to the show. If you do not already, leave a 5-star rating and a review and share this with somebody that you think could get value from that. And also check out the Austin Zaback Show as well, because I was on his. So guys, thank you so much, and go buy some businesses. See ya.